The big U.S. jobs report released today. How is the U.S. labor market doing? That's coming up on Business Matters. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining me here today. I'm your host, Don Mao. We have a great show for you today. Before we get to the markets, we actually experienced an earthquake here at our New York headquarters. It was a 4.8 magnitude. I think we're all fine though. So now on to U.S. stocks. They finished higher today after a strong jobs report reinforced the view that the economy remains healthy. Stocks finished higher despite the fact that it may suggest that the Federal Reserve could delay cutting interest rates. All major S&P 500 sectors advanced, with communication services, industrials, and technology among those leading the gains. S&P also posted a weekly decline, actually, after getting mixed economic data during the week. Money markets are now pricing in around 2 rate cuts this year, down from 3 a few weeks ago. Now let's talk about the big jobs report. Came in hot, and job growth remains plentiful at American businesses. So the U.S. economy added 303,000 positions last month, according to the latest data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The total so far surpasses economists' expectations. They had actually projected a much lower number here, around 200,000 jobs for the month. The employment rate fell to 3.8% in March, has remained below 4% actually for 26 straight months, and this is the longest such stretch since the late 1960s. Average hourly earnings rose 0.3% in March for the past 12 months, and wages increased 4.1%. Wage growth in a 3 to 3.5% range, by the way, for your information, is seen as consistent with the Fed's 2% inflation target. So all in all, in March, U.S. employers hired far more workers than expected while raising wages, suggesting that a strong economy is here, and it also means the Fed could delay its rate cuts for this year. Now, for further analysis of today's jobs report, we're bringing in Julia Pollack. She's the chief economist at ZipRecruiter. Take a look. So, Julia, 303,000 jobs added in March. Pretty good jobs report, right?
This was a tremendous report across the board, showing broad-based, strong job growth, falling unemployment, rising work week, and falling wage growth. Sort of what more could the Fed want?
So apparently this is above expectations. What has been the reaction to this stronger report?
Well, I'm not sure why so many people were expecting to see a lower number. We've now seen a 5-month rally in the stock market, 11 months of positive real wage growth, and pretty strong real wage growth. Months of easing financial conditions. There are so many tailwinds pushing this labor market forward that I think the expectation should be for much faster job growth than we saw in 2019. There are 2 other reasons for that. One is that we still have about 4 million fewer jobs in the economy than we would have absent the pandemic. And so in some ways, this economy is still recovering from the pandemic, and so faster than average growth, I think, is to be expected. And 2, immigration is very strong right now. 3.3 million immigrants came into the country in 2023, well above the 1.1 million expected. And so those people are taking jobs, they're spending, and they're both boosting the supply of labor and the demand for labor.
Do you think the immigration situation is that one contributing factor to why the unemployment rate apparently in March ticked down a little bit?
It's a major reason for why the unemployment rate has been sort of steadily, stably sort of low at about the same level it was in 2019, even as job growth has been faster by about 100,000 extra jobs each month. So participation rising is the main reason for that.
I see. Okay, let's talk about the household side. So last time we talked, there was a bit of a difference between the establishment and the household. What are we seeing today?
So there's still, over the long term, quite a wide gap between those two surveys over the past year. But this month's survey finally brought them into closer alignment with a big 498,000 increase in the employment level in the household survey. Finally, after months of weak household surveys, we see a very strong household survey that's more consistent with the establishment survey.
And can you tell us a little bit more about wage growth and what you're seeing?
Yes, so we're seeing pretty strong wage growth. We have strong hours growth for workers and non-supervisory workers. Wage growth that was actually fairly robust over the month, but on a year-over-year basis, it has been coming down pretty steadily now.
Okay, so we have to talk about the Fed because there's a lot of attention on whether the Federal Reserve is going to cut interest rates this year. So with this strong jobs report, what is the Fed thinking? Are we still going to get cuts?
So I think the Fed will be pleased to see this report, and this report won't sway them one way or the other. It definitely, due to that decline in wage growth, keeps 3 cuts on the table. This report doesn't rule out rate cuts, but it also doesn't necessarily support them. I think all eyes should be on the inflation data that will be coming in the coming weeks. That will be more decisive.
Oh, okay, just final question. What is your estimate of how many rate cuts we're going to get this year?
I still think that it's likely that we could see 2 or 3 cuts this year. The Fed believes that interest rates are currently restrictive. Taylor rule models also suggest that rates should be slightly lower right now, and so I think at some point they will do so.
All right, Julia, always great speaking to you.
Good talking to you too.
Staying on the topic of jobs, we're now seeing more signs that artificial intelligence could displace workers. So staffing provider Adecco said today that AI will lead to many companies employing fewer people in the next 5 years. And we're talking about this report because the Adecco survey is one of the largest into the AI topic. The report is based on a survey of executives at 2,000 large companies. Some 41% of senior executives expect to have smaller workforces because of AI technology. Adecco CEO says that, quote, let me read this to you, almost all jobs are going to be impacted by AI one way or another. So something to keep in mind. And speaking of job cuts, tech industry layoffs continue, it seems like, with the most recent being Apple. NTD Sean Marshall looks into the company's sectors where some of those layoffs possibly is connected to.
Apple is laying off more than 600 workers in California. The iPhone maker notified 614 workers in multiple offices on March 28th that they were losing their jobs, with the layoffs becoming effective on May 27th. According to reports to regional authorities. One section where layoffs are speculated to have come from is their canceled fully autonomous car area. Lauren Fix has some info on that area of the car industry.
Well, you're seeing a lot of layoffs of a lot of different companies. You're seeing companies like Canoo, which was doing autonomous shuttles. They're having terrible financial issues. Faraday Future can't even afford to pay the rent. Luckily, they have not been told to depart their particular location for their factory. You just saw Fiskars having huge financial problems with the stop of production of cars.
I also spoke with Bob Bilbrook about some of Apple's latest happenings.
There's no reason for Apple not to be, a player in the car and especially autonomous car industry. So I don't believe they completely killed their program. They potentially killed creating a complete car. But the technologies that power a lot of these infotainment systems or navigation systems and other things that will ultimately bring an autonomous car to market, I think they're going to be squarely playing in that space.
The canceled fully autonomous car project was said to be too costly to build and had a lot of confusion over the direction of the project. At least 87 of the people worked at an address corresponding to a secret Apple facility for micro-LED technology in their next-generation screen development. The production costs are too high to make it economically viable.
And it took Samsung literally 10 to 11 years to get their flexible LEDs to market, which are used on many of their phones today. But that technology was actually being developed like 12 years ago with Samsung. So to get into that business is very costly.
There could possibly be more unknown layoffs as Apple has workers on both projects at multiple facilities in other states. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Now, besides jobs, another big topic today is the Baltimore Bridge, and let me tell you all about it. President Biden visited the site of the Baltimore Bridge collapse today. Biden is meeting with local officials and some of the relatives of the 6 construction workers who died in the collapse. Now, since the accident, crews have been working to remove portions of the bridge. The president, who had vowed to use federal funds to fully pay for the bridge reconstruction, but it is sparking growing partisan backlash. Biden said he hopes the channel will be reopened by May. And the Baltimore disaster was also a big topic at today's congressional hearing on port safety. Officials are saying that it's too early to know what caused the backlash, whether it was an accident or a malicious attack. But I think one thing is for sure, there's plenty of lessons to be learned here, that perhaps America has been too complacent with port security. Here's the Heritage Foundation's Brent Sadler.
Protective dolphins, which would have prevented or deflected the full force of the Dolly from taking out the bridge, were not in place. This was based on a similar incident that happened in 1980, but yet in the intervening years nothing was done. How many other bridges are likewise not hardened because shipping has changed dramatically in the intervening years? So there's a task that doesn't take very long to figure out that needs to get done. When it comes to priorities, which is what I really think the issue is on resourcing, it's been easier to focus on other areas. It's been easy to kick the can down the road because we had the best infrastructure, we had the best fleets, but now our competitors have caught up.
Sadler says the U.S. is falling behind in terms of its maritime infrastructure. That's behind China and, of course, other countries as well. For example, here, America builds very few ships, as we found out today when Representative Carlos Jimenez asks the Port of Miami's deputy director about Miami's situation. Listen.
Are you familiar with all the cruise ships that dock here at Port Miami? Home port here?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
How many were built in the United States?
From what I can recollect, none of the cruise vessels that are coming here right now.
None of the cruise ships
That's correct.
Are you familiar with most of the cargo ships that dock here?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
How many of those are built in the United States?
From what I can recollect, none.
Mr. Sadler, that's a sad state of affairs.
Jimenez says America used to lead in manufacturing, but now its Navy is smaller than China's. As American firms struggle with labor shortages, supply chain woes, inflation, and lack of investment, Chinese firms, on the other hand, are not, because they play by different rules, and here's what they are.
It's a state-owned enterprises, and so they benefit both from direct and also indirect subsidies. They also take their orders, most often, not from an economic perspective, but from a Communist Party's perspective. So they are not a free market entity. And so that allows them to put national assets behind whatever their strategic interests are. If it's buying access into a port, if it's designing ships at a lower cost so that they can elbow in or to take over market share, they'll still do it. Now, there's still a lot of comparative advantages that our allies and that we have in this sector. We just have not taken full advantage of it.
Sadler says there needs to be a revolution in shipping, partially through a family of legislation. He says America's agencies are scattered across different departments. Sadler says they need to work together, that the laws need to expand shipbuilding, protect infrastructure, and make America competitive again. Now, we just have a bit more time left before we get to the break, and I wanted to talk to you guys about another type of infrastructure. And the focus here is how safe is the power grid in the U.S. Well, apparently that the electrical networks becoming more susceptible to cyber attacks, according to a U.S. regulator. The number of weak spots in the U.S. grids grew almost 10% last year compared to the year before, with almost 60 more per day. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation said Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the war in Gaza have dramatically increased the number of cyber threats to the grid in the U.S. Plus, a greater number of threats are coming from China as well. The regulator also expects that in the upcoming U.S. presidential election, the probability of attacks on the grid will also rise. Okay, taking a short break now, but when we come back, a new report says China will influence the upcoming presidential election. We'll tell you its method. And U.S. gasoline prices is going up. It's already at a record high. What's causing it? We'll give you all the factors at play here. Coming up after the break, don't go away.
How'd it happen?
She showed up dead on arrival.
This never gets easier.
It does when you call CarShield before your car breaks down. Look at these prices. The camshaft, transmission, engine.
Don't people know? A plan through CarShield could protect up to 5,000 parts and systems.
You hate to see it.
An out-of-warranty car is gonna break down eventually.
Right, which is why they need a plan through CarShield. Those expensive repair bills get paid and at the mechanic of their choice. They're notifying the family.
Poor guy. He doesn't even know what's coming.
Another victim of senselessly expensive repair bills. Can't save them all.
But we can keep trying. Didn't have to end this way. If he'd have just called CarShield before his car broke down.
Exactly.
Protect yourself from the unprecedented rise in cost for parts and repairs. Call now to save money with your price lock guarantee. Call 800-429-5128.
Hi, I'm Susan Lucci. I never thought about heart disease until I had my own heart event. I had heard many times that heart disease is the #1 killer. It went in one ear and out the other, frankly. I never had a health issue. I felt this slight pressure on my chest, just slight. But a few days later, while shopping at a boutique, that pressure returned, much stronger. By the time I got to the ER, the doctor decided to give me a CAT scan. He said, I don't think you understand. You are on the verge of a heart attack. I had a 90% blockage in my main artery and a 75% blockage in the adjacent artery. I received 2 stents in my arteries, stents developed through research funded by the American Heart Association. Those stents saved my life. That's why I'm in front of you today, asking you to join me in supporting the American Heart Association by becoming a monthly donor. Call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, your support now can help save your life or the life of someone you love. With you by our side, together we'll keep fighting this battle. Give $19 a month with your credit card, and we'll send you this special t-shirt that you can wear to show that you are helping save lives. I'm so grateful to the American Heart Association. Their research helped save my life. Put yourself on your to-do list. It could be the most important thing you ever do. Please, listen to your heart. The only reason I'm here today is because I did. So please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now. Join me as a monthly donor today and help save even more lives. Thank you.
Welcome back, and some China-related stories to start off. Washington sends Beijing a warning today. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen continues her visit to China, and she highlighted the risk that China is posing to jobs and businesses, specifically referring to China's overproduction of goods. Here's Yellen earlier today.
I believe addressing overcapacity and, more generally, considering market-based reforms is in China's interest. As I've said before, China is too large to export its way to rapid growth. And if policies are oriented only at generating supply and not also at generating demand, global spillovers will result.
The Biden administration is concerned that Chinese subsidies and overcapacity will spark a flood of low-priced exports. The massive scale of production has driven down costs and ignited price wars, and Western governments fear that capacity will flood their markets with low-priced exports, threatening American and European jobs. Meanwhile, China will also try to use artificial intelligence to disrupt America's election this year, and this is according to a new report by Microsoft. The company's threat intelligence team said that China is using fake social media accounts to poll voters on what divides them most, and then using this information to sow division and possibly influence the outcome of the U.S. presidential election in Beijing's favor. Now, specifically, the report said that there has been an increased use of Chinese AI-generated content in recent months, attempting to sow division in the U.S. on a range of topics. And that's topics including the train derailment, the Maui wildfires, drug use in the U.S., as well as immigration policies, for example, and racial tensions in the country. Moving on to some quick headlines for you. Tech stocks saw inflows of $18.6 billion the first quarter of the year. This is the third largest quarterly inflow on record, according to Bank of America. And Samsung is forecasting a 900% jump in profit in the first quarter. The upbeat forecast comes after Samsung reported 4 straight quarters of declining profits. The surge comes as memory chip prices see a strong recovery. Now let's talk about oil prices. It's on the rise, and this is amid geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. Prices are rising as well as over concerns of tightening supply. There's also expectations about demand growth as economies improve, which also puts upwards pressure on prices. Brent crude oil is trading above $90 for the first time since October. But the real question here is, how is this affecting prices at the pump? Right? I spoke to Patrick DeHaan, head of petroleum analysis at GasBuddy. Okay, Patrick, let's cut to the chase. Where are we at when it comes to gas prices?
Well, the national average has continued going up. We stand at about $3.60 a gallon across the U.S. That's the highest we've seen the national average since October of last year, and it probably won't stop as oil prices have continued to climb. Oil now also at its highest level since October. We have not only the seasonal factors pushing gas prices up, but also the rise in the price of oil working against us, and motorists are likely to have to dig deeper in weeks ahead as prices likely are continue going to rise.
Now, this 360, is this something normally we experience at this time, or is this something that is higher than what we experience?
Well, I think it is something we expected to start the year. That is, we predicted that prices for gasoline, the national average, could rise as high as $3.67 in April, and it could rise into the 380s for the month of May before things start to settle down. So it's not largely unexpected, but certainly seeing oil going up alongside of gasoline can be a little bit concerning, as it could cause prices to be a little bit higher than we anticipated earlier this year when we released our 2024 outlook.
What's contributing more? You mentioned a couple of factors here. Is oil contributing more, or another factor?
I'd say it's primarily 3 seasonal factors that are contributing the primary increase here. Refineries doing maintenance before the summer driving season starts. While they do that maintenance, they're not able to produce as much gasoline. In addition, we've made the switch over to cleaner, more expensive blends of gasoline ahead of the summer. With the exception, the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast haven't made the final jump yet, and they're going to see prices jumping throughout the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast in mid-April. And also demand for gasoline is going up. Things like Easter, spring break travel, the eclipse also pushing demand higher. It's those 3 factors that are largely behind the increase, but the price of oil now is having some impact as well.
And are we going to see even higher oil prices? Brent crude, for example, hitting $90 a barrel?
I think that's certainly within the realm of possibility. OPEC is largely behind the rise in the price of oil, continuing its extension on production cuts through the second quarter. So OPEC really carefully balancing supply and demand. global oil inventories have been in decline in response, and that's pushed up oil prices. And now a risk assessment, increasing risk between Israel and Iran developing over the last few days that could continue to put upward pressure on oil too. So that's certainly looking more potential that oil prices could be headed for $90 a barrel in the next couple of weeks.
How much upside is there when it comes to oil? Are we going to see 100?
I think $100 is probably a little bit above where I would expect to see things, but a lot of it really is going to be contingent on OPEC's production cuts, which are now largely expected to be renewed into the third quarter. And of course, largely contingent on that is things like the U.S. economy. Will the Fed start to cut interest rates? Will that spur oil demand in the U.S.? Will it spur demand globally? I think it's not impossible at this point that we could see $100 later this year, but I still think that's probably less than likely.
All right, back to prices at the pump. But which parts of the country are seeing the biggest impact?
Well, at least for now, the West Coast is seeing prices increase the most. Areas like California, Arizona, Nevada, Washington, and Oregon have been more affected by recent refinery maintenance that has dragged on. Those areas seeing prices going up well beyond what we're seeing nationally. Whereas the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic are seeing prices hold relatively low because many of those areas are still on winter blends of gasoline. There are no states that are below $3 a gallon on average, but there are still about 20 metros that are seeing sub $3 prices. Most of those will probably disappear, though, in the coming few weeks.
All right, quickly, just one more question. When are we expected to see prices come down a bit?
Well, I think all of this will go into a peak. Usually that peak happens in April or May. We could start to see some modest relief in the month of June. Then we get into hurricane season, and that's going to be a wild card. Typically, gas prices ease through the summer, but hurricane season certainly could upset that forecast.
All right, Patrick DeHaan, Head of Petroleum Analysis. Gas Buddy, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And that's all the stories we have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any feedback, feel free to let me know down in the comments. Have a great weekend. Don't forget,